My name's Millie Telford. I'm a Bundjalung and South Sea Islander woman, and really excited to be sitting here next to Tarneen. We met, I don't know,
2015?
2015?
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually remember that. We were,
I think we're organising like the Stop the Forced Closure stuff.
yeah.
And also like Seed Mob.
Yeah, and there were big climate rallies, and it was the first time in a big way that Seed Mob were organising Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to be at the front of the climate rallies. And at the time there was big yarns about stopping the forced closures of communities, and Tarneen and War were organising all the big rallies, and in all of that we met each other and been activists alongside each other ever since.
So my name is Tarneen, Onus Brown, and I'm a proud Gunditjmara and Yorta Yorta person through my mum, and I'm a Bindal and Miriam through my dad, but I live here in Melbourne, and it's really nice to be here and yarn about the upcoming referendum and also like answer some of your questions. So if you're wondering what is this big apple we've
got here? It opens up and there are lots of questions. So many different questions. These have all come from the Clothing the Gaps community, and so excited to answer them.
Yeah.
Should we get into it?
Let's do it.
All right. Do you want to choose the first one?
Pressure's on. So the first question is, why should white people be allowed to vote on this, considering it's a voice for Indigenous people?
I mean, it's really frustrating that we are in a position right now where, in a lot of ways, it really feels like the country is having a conversation about us without us. And, I think there is so much frustration that this vote, at the end of the day, our people make up roughly 3% of the population. So, wherever we land on this within ourselves, it's the majority of people out there who which will influence the outcome. And I think I really resonate with that frustration and where that comes from. And I think there's so much of we've been having conversations with Mob right around the country, really since the start of the year, even into late last year, and so much of what we've heard is just there haven't been enough spaces for our mob to be able to come together and have yarns amongst ourselves, and to share how we're feeling about it and what we think and what questions we have and what concerns we have. And that's so much in how our mob come to decisions within ourselves. We want to be able to hear from each other, and we want to have those conversations with our family and and those that we love and we're surrounded by, and we haven't had enough of that. That's what we've been really hearing. And so when the rest of the country is going to make up the outcome of this, it's super frustrating. But I think the part of in terms of the question of why it's happening, it's important to acknowledge that for a representative body that for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we've had different representative bodies over the years. We've had ATSIC, we've had organisations like the Congress of First Peoples. We've had all these different bodies that, unfortunately, when those bodies have spoken truth to power and said things that have called out government on the inaction or the harmful racist policies or the broken promises, whatever it is, those bodies have been abolished because government didn't like what they were saying. And so the difference with this is that a referendum is the only way that you can change the constitution. And when you do that, in terms of what this moment is proposing to establish a voice that is enshrined in the constitution, that basically means that there's no way that the government could abolish this body unless they were to go to another referendum. And so it guarantees, I guess, an ability for our people to be listened to and heard, even if we're saying things that the government of the day don't like. So, yeah.
Next question.
Should we go to our next question?
Yeah.
All right. What's in the apple?
You go.
Nervous now. Do you think that a successful yes vote will mean the government will be able to negotiate with the voice body to enact a treaty?
I think that I think that so many of our mob are demanding that a treaty happen and have been demanding it for such a long time. And I think that the representative body or the voice could be a mechanism for that, for sure. And I think that we have to make sure that happens. Like, we have this referendum coming up, but really all the work comes after it. Like, that's going to be so much of the work of making sure that it is representative of different communities around the country, and making sure that it is doing the aspirations for our communities as well. What do you think, Millie?
Yeah, I agree. I think, a successful yes vote really sends a message to, the government and to the people of Australia and to the world that, that the majority of Australians are willing to change business as usual. Like, enough is enough, and, the majority of people want to see change, and I think that gives a mandate for much more to be possible beyond, the actual sort of mechanism of what the referendum question is about. I think it sends a really strong message, and I think it gives us as blackfellas, the ability to then be able to continue to build on the momentum that we've been building for decades, Like, I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge right now, is that over the last decade, even just in our introductions, like, we're young people, but we've been building on the legacy of our old people that have gone before us, who've been fighting for such a long time.
I'll just do this one. I'm mob. How do I respond to whites when they say, but what about Aboriginal people who are saying no? I think that, Aboriginal people, we have diverse opinions, and I think that, we have to respect other people's opinions and people's values as well. And I think the thing with the blackfella know is that people are asking for treaty, people are asking for the same things that we are, and I don't think that we should be devaluing people's opinions and positions. Yeah, I think that it's really important that we hold this country to account, and I think part of that is going to the referendum, asking all Australians if they want to support representation for our people. And I think that whitefellas and non-Aboriginal people ultimately shouldn't get to decide, but they will. And I think that non-Aboriginal people should write yes ultimately.
I think the other thing I'd add to that question about, for mob, when whitefellas are asking about where mob are at on all of this, I think there's a couple of things. 2/3 of voters out there have said that they want to hear from an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person before they make up their mind, and so it does sort of make sense. I think that's why we need to be sharing more First Nations voices and stories, so that we're reaching those masses. But what I'd say is that really for those non-Indigenous people, go and have conversations with your own family and friends, and for mob, let's have conversations amongst ourselves, because I think that's where it's not going to be helpful for whitefellas to be telling our mob how we should think or feel. That's not it. But I think if you want to make a difference, go talk to your own family and friends and community. What's the next question? Why is community divided?
I think the community is divided because lots of community don't see this referendum as a way to enact change. And I think that also people I think also think that our community is divided because we all kind of want the same thing, but we have different ways of getting there. So some of us, think that going for referendum is going to help, and others don't. And I think that I just want to touch on that. Me and Millie haven't been on board with this the whole time. We've gone through the weeds and come to this position later on, and were actively campaigning against the recognised campaign in 2016-17. So it has been a journey. Yeah, it really has been a journey to get here. And I think that everybody in our community is allowed to be individual in the way that they have their positions, and people in Parliament, people around this country don't all think the same and don't all agree on things. So I think there's also an expectation that Aboriginal people or First Nations people have to agree on issues that affect First Nations people, and that's just not true for our community, but for any community.
Yeah. And I think the division in community also comes from a place of, this referendum is being forced upon us, and it's come at a time when we haven't had space to have the yarns amongst ourselves enough yet, and we're being forced into a yes or no binary, and that's not, this is so much more than yes and no. It's so much more than what happens in the next 5-6 weeks. The fight will continue beyond that, and I think that's what we've got to set our sights on and remind ourselves of. And, I want to be fighting and standing side by side all the different mob that, that we have been for a really long time. It actually makes me emotional thinking about the way that we've been pit against each other, when actually there's so many other fights out there that we would usually be side by side. And so when you lift the conversation up outside of or beyond the yes and the no, and you focus on the widely held values that bring us together, the widely held values that, what it means to be a black follower, and who we are and what's important to us, and the vision of our communities that we have been fighting for such a long time. There's so much agreement on that. And as Tan said, there's just different pathways to getting there. And I think in this moment right now, we see the referendum as a step along that journey. It's not the final destination.
Yeah. It has, I think that, like Millie said, it's wild that it is so divided and that's so honest. But and I know that after this we'll all be working together, and I just, well, for me anyway, I don't care what position black followers are in on this. It's that I'm gonna support and love my mob no matter what, and I'm not gonna be actively working against my own people. And I think there's love and generosity, and that's coming out at the moment as well in our community, that no matter what stance you take, for our community, then we're still going to love and support. And I think the biggest fear for a lot of us is that there's going to be fractures, but there's, we have to work as hard as we can for that not to happen as well.
We could yarn forever. Should we move on to the next question?
Yeah.
My question to the interviewees is, how have you, as an Indigenous person, come to believe that assimilating into the constitution of an illegal occupation will actually positively change Indigenous people's lives on this continent?
Well, I think, one thing, I guess, the reckoning is for this, and about being included in the constitution. I think there's lots of concerns that community have around sovereignty and being included in the constitution, but honestly most Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are included in the constitution in their state. Victoria has had constitutional recognition since 2005. I don't think it makes Aboriginal people in Victoria any more assimilated than anybody else, so I think that assumption about assimilation is really not true. I think it's really not true for lots of Aboriginal people, Torres Strait Islander people across the country that are included in their state's constitution. I think that, like Millie has touched on already, there's a mechanism in which there's a representative body that can't be abolished through a referendum. And I think that's really powerful that can even happen. But we do have to work really hard to get over the line, because it's not fair that time after time our representative bodies keep getting abolished.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's assimilationist. I just don't.
Yeah. I think this question for me, like, in terms of just sort of, in a way, like how it makes me feel and what it makes me think, like what it reminds me of is just like where I know so many mob have been at in the conversations that people have had with us one-on-one, or, you know, sent in our DMs, and, you know, people have said that, you know, there's a lot of fear out there and a lot of anxiety around what this means. And, you know, I know that there's a lot of young mob who are really worried about, you know, like wanting to do the right thing and wanting to, you know, stand up for what's right and be staunch, and, you know, like it just brings up all of that anxiety that I know so many people have about, I guess, how we're perceived by one another as well. And I think that it just, it makes me sad that I think we're in a position where people have said that they're worried about sharing where they're at in this, what they're thinking, how they're feeling. And not that you have to disclose how you're going to vote, but, you know, there are people who have said that they want to do that, but they're fearful that if they do that, that they'll get either attacked by racists, or that, you know, or that some of our own mob might, you know, say that they're, you know, sell out or assimilated or whatever. And I think, you know, we need to be able to have respectful conversations with each other, and regardless of what side of the campaign or which way, you know, you're sort of leaning, I think we need to hold each other accountable to treating each other with respect and compassion and understanding. And, you know, and everyone comes to it in their own way. So I think, for us, we just wanted to be able to share the journey that we've gone on to get to the position that we're in, and, explaining, I guess, what writing yes means to us. And even this shirt here that I'm wearing, and I know on the podcast people won't be able to see it, but it's a shirt with a design by an incredible artist, Tasha Davis. On the front it says, "What does yes mean to you?" And then on the back, Tarn, can you read it out?
It says, "For First Nations justice, full listening, truth-telling, respect, representation, better future, treaties, cultural heritage protection, and moving forward together." And I think it really does, you know, really touch on, like, it is more than just constitutional recognition. It is about representation, it's about moving forward, and, like safeguarding our futures for our young people, for our old people, whatever that might mean. Because, like, even when I was watching the announcement, I was on the phone to my mum, and I was like, oh no, I can't be bothered listening to Elbow cry, like, this is going to just, like, really annoy me. And Mum was just, like, crying on the phone to me. She's like, Tarneen, don't, I feel really emotional about this. I used to have to sit at the back of my classroom as a young girl, and she was, like, so upset. She was like, I can't believe this is actually happening. Just really proud and, like, really excited, and I think that I was just so satirical, and, like, I'm over it, but it does actually put, you know, my perspective of my community and my family in the front of my mind, that my mum, it actually means something to my mum. It actually means something that this representation is happening, and that she was crying to me on the phone, talking about how bad it was in her days. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, being able to listen to one another without judgment, knowing that everyone has a different sort of perspective and reasoning on this, I think that's what's going to keep us together is, being able to have that space to hold one another regardless of where you're at.
Yeah. And Sissy Austin told me to listen to the song Let Love Rule by Uncle Archie, and honestly I cried so much. And I think you
rule, let the tears flow.
Yeah, so you should totally listen to it. This is a good one for you, Millie, I reckon. How will the referendum change the daily lives of First Nations people?
Yeah. I mean, the referendum itself, I think, is already, the process of it is having a big impact on our lives. But in terms of, like, if a yes vote gets up and, you know, if we were to, what that would mean is that, I guess it's important to also just note that, like, first, we are going to this big vote on October 14th, right around the country. You know, the early voting will start 2 weeks before that, and then remote voting for all the mob out and remote communities will start 3 weeks before the date as well. And if the outcome is a yes, then you know, that sends a message to government, to the country, that, you know, people do want to have the opportunity to hear from and listen to the you know, perspectives of First Nations people through this representative body. But right now, you know, first you've got to go to a vote, and then the model gets decided. And so that process, you know, government have committed to doing a consultation process with mob to go out and actually hear, like, how do blackfellas want to be represented, you know, and making sure that we get to have a say in who speaks for us. And that's really important. Like, that's so much of what we've heard from mob, like, you know, the questions of just, like, how is it going to work? You know, who's going to get elected? Do we get to have a say in that? And, you know, and representation really matters. Like, it means a lot to our communities. We have so many strong speakers out there who, you know, whether it's in, you know, in health, education, you know, keeping kids in community, you know, ending deaths in custody, so many different issues, protecting country and cultural heritage, like all of that. Like, we've got so many strong speakers who, you know, often don't get heard. And so having a representative body, having our community have a way to have a say in who gets to speak for us is what this is about. And I think that is a pathway that can have ripple effects for generations to come, and that can have an influence in the policy outcomes that, you know, that enable us to have a say on issues that affect us. Because I think overwhelmingly a lot of people agree that people most affected by an issue should have a say in the decisions that impact them. You know, whether that's people with disabilities, whether that's people living in remote and regional areas, whether it's young people, older people, First Nations people. I think a lot of us can agree that those people, if there's a decision that's going to affect them, they should, you know, be asked how they feel about it, what ideas they have, what solutions they have, and they're going to be best placed to do that. And so this would give us an opportunity to be able to have a say on issues that affect us. Yep. Next question?
Yeah.
All right. What have we got here? Why is the government funding a Voice Yes campaign but not a No campaign? Serious
Funny story. The government isn't funding both. So, short answer, the government, isn't funding a yes campaign because they didn't want to fund a no campaign. So, that's...
Yeah, so usually there would be, like in other referendums, you'd be able to, like, apply for some small grants to be able to put on a community event or information session or whatever it might be. And yeah, as Tarneen said, they didn't want to fund the no, so that then meant that they effectively couldn't fund a yes. There are, you know, obviously there's different money that's gone into, you know, the educational materials and other things, but ultimately at the end of the day, there hasn't been government money for the actual campaign itself, which has put pressure on, I think, you know, a lot of philanthropic bodies out there to fund campaigns. I think the racist no campaign is very well funded, very well resourced by the far right, and, you know, we can speak more about that, but I think one of the things, you know, that this does put pressure on, though, I think it means that it can be harder for communities to access resources to actually get out and have yarns with one another. Next question. What should blackfellas campaign? Hang on, let me start again. What should blackfellas campaign for if the referendum doesn't get up?
Keep doing what we're doing. Another day in the colony, like we, you know, there's so many different campaigns that are running from in climate, black deaths in custody. You know, I think it's just important that blackfellas continue to do the work that we're already doing, and like I can't think of one singular thing that we should be doing. I think it's that we continue to build up our movements.
Yeah. We have the solutions, our community knows best, and we just need to be able to set sight on our vision for the world that we're trying to build, and so much of that is about like continuing the fights that people are already leading out in communities across the country.
Did I do it or did you do it last time?
I don't know. Competition. Who gets questions?
Just trying to get it all done. I feel like we've already answered this one, so I'm going to leave it. It was, are you worried about the rise in lateral violence? There's multiple reasons I don't believe in lateral violence, but yeah, I think that black critique is really important, and I think that we should continue to critique each other respectfully, and we've said it a couple of times throughout. So that's the answer to that question.
You're going to go again?
What has been your thoughts and feelings of your Indigenous communities on organisations publicly supporting a yes vote? Has it increased cultural load, made them feel proud of orgs, made it harder to doubt, or harder to voice doubts about the referendum?
I think there's, can I look at it?
Yeah.
Because there's so many parts to it.
There's a lot of parts. It's like there's a part of like Aboriginal communities, you know, going towards it, yes. But also like, I mean, both of us don't work in Aboriginal organisations, but have previously. And I think that our communities continue to show up in the way that they think best, whatever is appropriate for different communities around the country. And so, yeah, our community has the solutions, and lots of Aboriginal organisations have the solutions, and they do that in the way that they do advocacy, and even around the referendum. Some organisations are intentionally not having a position because they are respecting the variety of First Nations voices, and some organisations are going all in on yes, some are going all in no, but I think that ultimately Aboriginal organisations, and particularly ACOs, Aboriginal Community Controlled Organisations, and their boards will make the best decisions for their organisations and their communities.
I don't have anything to add. That was beautiful. Okay. What if, instead of voting yes or no, lots of people wrote on the ballot paper treaty? If a lot of people did this, would it be an opportunity for the conversation of treaty to be brought forward quicker?
I feel like it's the Targo ad, like why can't we have both? Like we can, you know, we can have treaty and we can have a representative body, I think, like as long as we fight for it. If you write treaty on the ballot, those ballots like don't get counted as yes or no. So like I think people who even have those are like who get those as volunteers and will just like add it to the poll and add it to the number. So it's just an informal vote.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. So it's why, it's a really important point because it's why we've been saying write yes instead of vote yes, because on the ballot paper, unlike any other election where you often like put a number in a box or you might tick a box, you actually have to write the word yes YES or no, N-O, and that's the only way that your vote is going to get counted. If you write treaty, I really hear where that comes from. Like, we're frustrated that we're not being heard, and we've been fighting for treaty ever since colonisation. But I think that writing that on your ballot paper isn't going to be the most effective way to fight for treaty. I think you need to make sure that your vote counts by writing yes or writing no, and then continue the fight for treaty beyond this, because I think a representative body can be a pathway to be able to hold the government accountable to the bigger changes that we want to see, which include treaty.
That's really good.
Great. Awesome.
Do you find there is more media pressure for yes than no votes? I feel the explanation of no votes have been shoved under the rug a bit on my social media.
What do you reckon?
I think there's just also like two questions in a way, because there is like your media, your regular media, your newspapers, your television, your radio, and then there's like your social media. And I think that lots of our communities would be seeing lots of yes, especially if you're a black colour. You would be seeing lots of yes. But if you look at Murdoch Press, I think it came out yesterday or the day before, the Royal Commission to the Murdoch Press said that 85% of the no vote is like, not sorry, 85% of all of Murdoch's press is no. So I don't think that is I just don't think that that's the majority of people who watch 7, 9, read the Herald Sun, Sky News, all these like different TV shows, different radio stations, different newspapers. Lots of them are leaning towards no, and they're the people that have really lots of money, and also are like lots of our politicians, like your Peter Duttons and your Pauline Hansons, and I'm specifically talking about the racist no.
Yeah. I think social media algorithms and the way they work is often, it can be a bit of an echo chamber, and you can like see what you resonate with most. And so, if you're really for a yes, you're going to be seeing a lot of yes. If you're for a no, you're going to be seeing a lot of no. And if you are someone who might be persuaded by or influenced by a lot of sort of misinformation, disinformation, you're going to be seeing a lot of that as well. And I think, in the media, like, it's important to name that, like, the, Murdoch Media Empire News Corp are very strategic about what they're trying to do, and try and paint our people and our communities with this lens of, dysfunction, and they're trying to be divisive, and they're getting a lot of airtime, and they're giving airtime to, I think, people who don't speak for us, and that can be really frustrating. I know that, there's also... there's like so many different sides to this, and I think at the end of the day, what I wish we were seeing more of is actual community people, everyday people, whose voices really matter, who are out there doing the work, the community, everyday people that. Those that are going to be making up their minds for how they're going to vote, like that's who we need to be hearing from, like from one another, and so I think that I wish there was more stories that were elevated by First Nations people in particular, and just community members whose voices I think are really valid. Yep.
Good one.
Next question. Okay. Short. Not quite simple though. What is the right thing to do?
I think the right thing to do is to centre First Nations people's voices. I think the right thing to do is follow Get Up and get information, and I guess it's like listening to First Nations people's voices and stories, and I think that's really important going into this. And I think we'll see an increase of First Nations people coming into the media and coming into the public about what yes means to them. And I think that's really important. And I think the biggest thing is to have conversations with your community and your family.
As a non-Indigenous person, what are the best resources to point people towards when they want education on this? There's going to be so much misinformation and fear-mongering, and I'd love to be able to help point people towards some great resources.
Well, funny you are. Here's something I prepared earlier. Do you want to
sure. I mean, look, like, this is a resource that comes about in terms of how do you talk about First Nations justice now and beyond the referendum. And so this, this is about, centering First Nations leadership and the solutions and the aspirations that we have that we've been fighting for a really long time.
It's called Passing the Message.
It's called Passing the Message Stick. You can go to passingthemessagestick.org to find out more. We've got a full report where we did a whole messaging research project looking at the way people talk about these issues, the way that our mob talk about this. But really what we were trying to find is how do we find the messages that are most persuasive, that build support for a yes right now, and for the work that needs to continue beyond the referendum. And so, there's a full report, there's a couple of things I want to note in that, but we also have this conversation guide. And as we've said, like, conversations are the most important tool that we have right now to be talking to our family and friends, talking to our community, and we've got some tips for how you can do that. But in terms of...
should we give a tip? One of the tips?
Oh, yeah. So, in terms of the 5 key things that came out of this that we really need to centre is connecting with people over your shared values. So, whether it's a value of respect, listening, equity, care, love, values that everyone deserves to have a say in things that impact them. They're values that can enable us to connect with people regardless of how they might vote or their political alignment or anything like that. The second tip is being able to connect over the bigger vision. I think you've probably noticed that we've been doing that, really like casting, the sights on what is to come over the next few decades and what this moment is going to mean, how it's going to impact that. Centering First Nation solutions and leadership and our people in this. But really importantly also being able to talk about what we call like our theory of change. So, we do really believe that when millions of people come out in support and, for a resounding yes, that is, the power of that comes from the mandate that it sets to hold government accountable. And so, I think there is power in that. Governments only act when they feel pressure from voters, and so we need to really build that mandate. And then the last tip is actually being able to explain to people what's going on, what's the sequencing of what of this referendum and how does it work, and that first we go to a vote on October 14th, and then if it gets up, there'll be a consultation with community for what the representative body looks like and how it works.
Yeah, so you should go to our website.
And then the other place, like in terms of where this shirt's from, it's the Right Yes campaign that the First Nations Justice team at Get Up are leading, and they have so many different activities and actions and information for what you can do, how you can get out there and get active in your community. Cool.
There's not that many left. Which... we kind of answered this. Should non-Indigenous people be involved in campaigning for the referendum? I guess it depends what you're saying in terms of campaigning. Like, is it door knocking? Is it speaking to your workplace, or about how to take action? But I think in terms of public campaigning in media, I think it's really important that people see Indigenous people represented in the media, and that we be centred in this. So
Yeah, I think it's our stories and our voices that need to be elevated in this, and non-Indigenous people can share that and elevate that rather than centering themselves. But I also do truly believe that there is a role for non-Indigenous people to go out there and talk to their own family and friends and to really do the work, and to do the work now and be on the referendum. But in this moment, you know, there's so many hundreds of thousands of people right now who are still trying to work out where they're at and how they feel about this. And I think that we have been put into this position. You know, this is happening, and it feels like it's happening to us. And I think that we don't get a choice whether or not we get to engage in this. Like, we're seeing it every single day. Like, I got asked at the gym while I was working out what I thought about the voice. Like, no, not this morning. A couple of weeks ago. And so we don't get a choice whether or not we can switch off, and I think that's a privilege that non-Indigenous people have. And so I think that, you know, there's such an important role that non-Indigenous people have to really get out there and talk to their your own family and friends and other people, you know, and don't just sit on the sidelines. Like, we don't get that opportunity to sit on the sidelines. We're in this. Like, we're the ball that's getting thrown around and bashed around, and, you know, and dodgeball. Yeah, and meanwhile, there have been people that have been sitting there watching our communities go through this, watching, you know, the media like make out like we're the problem, and that's not okay. We need people to actually stand up and stand with us, and like I said, not just now in this referendum but beyond. And so there is absolutely a role for non-Indigenous people to play. Like, we make up roughly 3% of the population in order to actually get big changes on big issues like treaties, like truth-telling, like stopping deaths in custody, like protecting cultural heritage and having climate justice. Like, we actually need people, we need the masses, and we need to send a mandate to, and have that mandate to hold government accountable. So absolutely there is a role.
Yeah.
Fire me up.
Oh, I think up to... How can I have faith in a referendum with the government who is currently overlooking human rights to lock up our children as young as 10 years old?
So, I mean, for supporters and people out there listening, like, who aren't familiar with this, there's been some changes that the Queensland government have recently just rushed through that would see children as young as 10 locked up.
I've worked in the Aboriginal legal service and legal sector for a while, and I think that a similar thing happened in Victoria a few years ago, and it is shameful and it is disgusting, and I don't really have faith in the government either. I don't trust them, but what I do trust is our mob, and I trust that our mob will stand up and fight against them and hold governments to account, whether it's Queensland or the federal government or the Victorian government. I truly believe that our community are so good at being staunch and standing up to injustices like this, and I think that we can continue to do that, but I totally understand not having faith in government. And not me, blackfellas do have faith in government, and we shouldn't have faith in government, really. And we should need to continue to fight for better for our communities.
Does the voice to Parliament and constitutional recognition take us further away from self-determination and self-governance based on our own terms?
I think that's all. Yeah, I feel like there's two things there again. Like, it's, I think that the Constitution is a mechanism for the voice to Parliament to work, or like this representative body to work and not be abolished. But I think that the way that things are working at the moment, it hasn't been self-determined either. like we're at the whim of government of each term, and so I think that's a huge problem that hugely impacts the way that we can self-determine our lives and move through the future. And so, yeah, I think that it's, if anything, more of the aspirations of our community will be lifted and we'll be able to self-determine more policies that get made and more representation for our communities as well on like a national level that isn't just like particular voices, that it will be representative.
Yeah, and if the vote is a yes and we do get this representative body up, then the process of, you know, consultation to actually determine what the model looks like, how it's going to work, and actually how communities want to have a say in who speaks for us, that's an incredibly important opportunity that we're going to need, you know, community to be engaged with, to be able to really make sure that it is a representative model that's truly representative. You know, and I think that there's so many, you know, other examples of how we need to, you know, of other solutions out there that need to exist or coexist, like alongside of this, like at a state level, at a regional level, local level. And so, you know, this isn't a silver bullet that's going to fix everything, but it's a tool that we can have in our toolkit to be able to, you know, ensure that at a federal government level that our people get to have a say in policies that affect us.
One thing that I will quickly just touch on about this question is like, and also just because we are in Victoria, is that we, in Victoria, we have the Treaty Assembly, and I guess like it's an elected body, and I think that it's really nice and cool seeing blackfellas going up for elections, and we get, and blackfellas in Victoria, so it's only traditional owners that can be elected. And I think it's really cool to see that the elections happen, and you know, to see Andy Clark getting in like other people like Uncle Gareth Murray. It's really exciting time, and that was because of a huge consultation process. So I think we need, the important thing is we need to hold government to account for a good consultation process so that we can have the representation and the frameworks that we need.
And the Assembly is like a representative body, and then there's also the like truth-telling body, and then there's now a treaty framework and treaty negotiations that are going to start happening. So I think, you know, these things can happen side by side, but also there are examples out there of how these bodies can lead to those bigger changes that we're calling for. Cool. Is the idea that the voice isn't good enough or won't give enough power to Aboriginal folks a good enough reason to vote no?
I totally understand our community's calls and that it isn't strong enough and that it doesn't have enough power. I think that is totally fair, and I truly believe that as well. It's about how do we, you know, how do we even move through the referendum and demand more, and what will that look like? So I think it's really important that this is like a part of the process, right? It's like not the end goal, but how do we continue to be ambitious and ask for change that we really, really want?
Yeah. Final question. It's a long one. Okay, give me a second. There seems to be support from Indigenous people for both the yes and the no vote, with solid reasoning behind both sides. As a non-Indigenous person, I want to use my vote to amplify the voices of those most impacted by the result. I'm worried a no vote will validate right-wing folk who think nothing needs to be changed, and am worried that a yes will be a tokenistic measure and band-aid solution to a larger problem. How can we go into this referendum armed with the best information to support Indigenous community?
That is a very good question, and a really thought out one. I don't know, if we had an Ally of the Year award, like, I just really... Oh my God! No, don't know this person. No, I think that it's good, like, this person's really listened to both sides, and I think that lots of people, like, I feel that you feel that if there's no vote, then also the fact that Peter Dutton's building up his election campaign, and so he won even the election, the next election, on the back of a no vote. What does that mean for our, not just our communities, but for LGBT people, for refugees, for the disability community? I think that a lot is like depending on this referendum, not just for our community, but for so many other communities. Like the risk of losing for me, like the risk of winning to the risk of losing is much higher. Like I'd rather go in a win than lose and have Peter Dutton as a Prime Minister. I feel like having Trump, and that really scares me, and that means that so much of like the work that has gone in will just completely stabilise our movements as well. Stabilise? Freeze? I don't know. But it'll take us back, really, if he became Prime Minister. And that's something I'm really scared of. And I think that that's something that lots of communities around the country should be, worried about. Not just blackfellas, but what it means for different communities around the country that sit outside, like white Australian, like able-bodied, all those sorts of things.
Yeah. I really don't have too much to add to that, but I think this question does really resonate with so much of what we've been hearing as well. Like, I think a lot of people are in this position of not really knowing fully what to do. A lot of people who would typically be the people who would turn out on the streets, at our rallies, who would buy, clothes from Clothing the Gaps. Like, people are really stuck, like not knowing what to do, and they do want to do the right thing, and they they want to base their they feel uncomfortable making a decision that impacts someone else's lives, and they also they want to hear from First Nations people about how we think and we feel, and we deserve to have a spectrum of a political spectrum, and people need to understand that. But I think as Tarneen said, thinking about the bigger picture impact of this is what led me to the position I'm in, where I'm going to be writing yes, and I will be writing yes and then continuing to fight the fight, for justice, for First Nations justice for our people, well beyond the referendum. And so I think, working out where you see yourself in that and what you can do and how you can show up now and can continue to show up for our community is so important. So thank you for thinking about that really deeply.
Yeah, that's such a nice question to end on. So, but this has been really good, Millie. But the final things that we'll leave you with is, community care and looking after each other, and like we've said throughout this podcast, that this is much more than the referendum, and our relationships with people that we love and our community don't need to be severed through this process. I really don't think it's worth it. And I think that we need to come at this and be respectful of each other, and also have yarns with each other. I think that having disagreements and conflict in that way is really good and powerful, and we need to have those yarns as a community. But just continuing to think about after this referendum, because this is only a small bit of our movement in the time frame, but we have years and years. Millie and I, not even, you're not 30, but I'm 30, and we have such a long time, and we've been standing with so many people over the last decade, so many different activists and campaigners, blackfellow ones, and I think that it's about building that community care, and not listening to the TV, and not listening to what racists are having to say. If mob are having disagreements, but we ultimately care about each other, then like we can engage in those yarns, but don't engage with racists in the comments, and give like your family a call up your grandparents if they're still around, and catch up with family, and like honestly just black out. Like the last couple of days we've been having catch-ups online, but I just spend nights hanging out with blackfellas, even on an online space.
And then if there are mob out there who do want to get involved and do want to lend your time or resources or voices to this, we'd love to yarn with you, and we are, like, as soon as we get off this, I'm going to be spending the afternoon finishing like this toolkit that we've been putting together, which is designed by blackfellas for blackfellas for how to take action in your community, so that we can, over the next 5-6 weeks, if you want to, and you don't have to, but if you want to, we want to make it as easy as possible to support mob to get out there and take action. So, get in touch with us. We can post you copies of this. We can put you in touch with people if you want to speak to the media, if you want to be in social media, like whatever you want to do. If there are things that you want to do to take action, then like we're your gals. No. Sorry. Oh yeah. But yeah, actually, like people like Auntie Jackie Huggins, who, shout out Passing the Message Stick. Like this project has been led by the incredible leadership of black women, Larissa Bolden-Roberts and Auntie Jackie Huggins, been backed up by Australian Progress and Get Up, but it's their visionary leadership that has pulled together resources like this that are about shifting the narrative and winning the narrative for First Nations justice now and beyond the referendum. But I think, it's some of the older mob whose words have echoed over and over again in my mind, who were around in the 1967 referendum, who said that, if they knew how much support there was going to be, they wish they'd asked for more. And I think that is the thing that has carried me through this moment, because I'm like, yeah, it is so much more, and it will have an impact on the decades to come for First Nations advocacy and for other advocacy beyond that. And so my phone's ringing. We need to ask for more, and we need to share our vision. We need to lead with our values and, speak from our hearts and listen to one another, not judge each other, but actually just connect and, and be in this fight now and beyond the referendum.
Thanks for your questions, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for your questions. That was fun.